Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. We are doing I Talk About It Wednesdays, and today we have a very special friend of mine. And this woman is truly, truly amazing. She's an author. She's been in a couple of my conferences, and really, really amazing person. Really, really amazing person. So today we're going to be talking about friendship grief, and the title of it is "They're Not Family," or they're not family anyway, right? So we're going to bring her on. This is going to be a great conversation. And as always, do me a favor. This is for educational purposes only. But if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor. Go over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And as we're going through, if you guys have any questions or comments, put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer those as we go along. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring up my really good friend, Victoria Noy. And we're going to get into this conversation. So you guys sit back and enjoy. All right.
Oh, thanks, Tony. I don't know how I'm going to live up to that introduction, but we will try.
You know what? You're already living up to it. What you talking about? You have blessed me with your presence today and this conversation that we're going to be having. It's me that's truly honored to be having this conversation with you, right? Because
Yeah,
we don't normally talk about friendship grief,
right.
right? And I know that it's a topic that you're very fluent in. And so before we get started, introduce yourself. Tell people where you're from.
I grew up in St. Louis. I've lived in Chicago since 1977. I
Mhm.
moved here to work in theater because I have 2 degrees in theater. I have no degrees in social work or therapy or psychology or anything like that. Um, this is actually my fourth career writing, and it was a surprise to me, not anything I planned on doing, but it's what I'm doing. So
Yeah,
I'm making the most of it.
I love that. I love that. And like I said, you just sent me 2 books, and we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about the topic,
Hmm.
friendship grief, right?
Well,
And where
it's
did that come from?
I think the thing that kind of irritates me about grief is people establish a hierarchy. That some forms of grief are more important or worse or more life changing than others.
Mhm.
And and I get that, that we need to make sense of grief, but in doing that hierarchy thing, we diminish other people's grief because it's not the same as what we're talking about. I would never, ever, ever diminish the grief for a family member, parent, spouse, child, grandparent, anything. Um, but I think, for too long, the attitude about friends dying was, well, it's not like their family. You know,
Right.
it's friends and loved ones. Friends are loved ones, you know, and and you know, I saw so many examples of how people dealt with grieving their friends
Mhm.
over the years, and it had an impact on me until I finally decided to start writing about it.
Okay. And I totally agree, right? Being in the grief field, you see it all. You see it all from different perspectives. And I'm just like you. I don't take nothing away from anyone. I also, but I also go in with the understanding it depends on the relationship that we have with individuals, right? And I've probably like yourself, lost many, many of friends that I care about very deeply, friends that I really consider to be family, right?
Mhm.
And so I didn't think the impact was any less detrimental than losing a beloved family
Mhm.
member because they were family to me. They knew
And
these people that we call friends. We spend so much time with them. We share a lot of things with them, right? We
mhm.
grow together. We learn how to play together. We learn how to move through this life together, right? With the sense of, hey, man, I'm here, right? You know what I'm saying? And this is what we're going to do. And you tend to enjoy the moments with them as well.
Right. Well, and I think that I saw some really unique examples of friends taking care of each other,
Yes.
particularly in the 1980s and early 90s when I was raising money in the HIV/AIDS community, when there were people suffering and dying who'd been abandoned by their parents, been kicked out of their homes, lost their jobs, thrown out of their churches because they had AIDS. And their friends stepped up for them, took care of them, buried them, advocated for them, and became their families.
Hey, and you know what? When you say that, um, I often think of the relationship between you and Marty McNabb, right? You know what I'm saying? Because every time I've had her on conference, he was like, "I'm coming, Marty." You know what I'm saying? And it was always been vice versa. And so then we talk about friendships, right? When did that friendship start? And do you? I mean, are you guys close like family?
Oh,
Uh,
with Marty?
yeah, with Marty.
Let me see now. This is 2024 now. I was working on a book about the contributions of straight women in the AIDS community. No one had written a book like that, so I decided I was going to. And I had these postcards printed that basically said, I'm looking for women to interview. If you are one of them that I should interview, or you know someone I should, contact me. And I put them in various places. And one of the places I put them was the bookstore in the LGBT Center in New York.
Mhm.
And Marty saw the postcard and got a hold of me. And we became friends online. And then I attended her Mother's Day show and tales in Brooklyn um, in 2017. And that was the first time we met in person. We've actually only been together in person like 2 or 3 times in all these years. But we do events online together.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
And it's been a very mutually beneficial friendship, not just on a business side, but also on a personal side. We
Right.
just like each other.
No, I asked that for a reason, right? Because when we talk about the topic that we're talking about today, friendship grief and things like that, and you tell me about Marty, it makes my heart smile because she's another amazing person. I was supposed to meet her in person when she was out here in Colorado. Um, Unfortunately, when I got out there, the people was like, "Oh no, it's not going on." And then I messaged her. I was like, "Hey, maybe I'm in the wrong spot." She was like, "No, they were supposed to let you back here, Tony." So that's how I actually met Marty. Was before the conference that we was doing,
Yeah.
at her show and tell. And so I think about that, and I go, "Wow, how often do you get to build a relationship like that with someone?"
I think it depends on the person,
Right, right,
because I mean, we've all met people, and when we met, we felt like we'd known them forever,
right, right.
even if we're not in person, like in the same room, even if it's online. And some people, it takes longer to warm up to each other for whatever reasons. It's nothing against that person, it's just the personality. Um, but I think that once you find common ground, that's when it grows. You know, it's
Yeah.
and people can surprise you. I mean, it's just like when you're grieving for anybody, you're always surprised by the people who show up and the people who don't show up.
Right.
And I think that's normal, but it's still surprising and sometimes disappointing.
Okay. I definitely agree with that. And I can see both sides of it. Um, which, brings me to a couple of questions. when we talk about friendship grief, right? When we go through specific losses, and I'm speaking. This one is coming from a place of experience. So, a couple of years ago, my friend and his family got wiped out by COVID, and I considered this man to be my brother. You know what I'm saying? He was him and his mom and dad and his sister was really family to me, and I knew his children as well.
Mhm.
And it poses a challenge and a possible problem. The reason being, when he passed away, the people who had known my good friend, we all showed up. After everything was done, we were expecting his family to understand the relationship that we had. And I think a lot of us got pushed back because we had to come to the
Sure.
notion that, hey, just because he considered us family, we considered him family, it doesn't mean that the rest of his family consider us the same way.
Right.
We're not going to have that same bond or that, receive that same treatment as well. And I think that causes a lot of resentment
It
from
does.
from the outside to the family, to the immediate family, because we're like, hey, where were you at when all of this was going on? Or, like, I've known you since you was, and
Well,
I,
sometimes it's even the family doesn't even know you exist.
right,
You
yes,
know, when we were growing up, our friends were the kids on the block, the kids in the neighborhood, the kids at school, the kids in Boy Scouts, everybody knew everybody else.
right,
So if someone wanted to contact your friends, it wasn't difficult. I have friends all over the world.
hmm
Many of them I've never met in person, but we're friends.
right,
And for whatever reason, we're friends. There are people who I went to college with in Iowa who live in New York, or they live in New Jersey, or they live in upstate in Washington State. How do you track down all these people when someone dies if you don't know where they are or even who they are? You know, my husband doesn't know all my friends. I don't know all his friends,
right,
and that makes it difficult. Now, in your situation, um, COVID complicated things.
right, yes,
You know, much was made of the fact that families could not visit their loved ones in the hospital. Neither could friends. When my friend Christy was dying 2 years ago, two people were allowed in the hospital to visit her, not at a time, two people total, her sister and one of her two brothers.
mm,
They were the only people allowed to visit her. And I would have driven down to St. Louis in a heartbeat to see her, but I couldn't, and, even when only family members could attend funerals,
mhm,
go to the cemetery, go to the church, whatever, there were severe restrictions on the numbers so that even all the family members couldn't be there. So friends were left on the outside, completely on the outside, to find their own way to grieve. But you're right, sometimes there's a lot of friction between friends and family members,
mhm.
and a lot of times it's very justified.
It can also be misconstrued as jealousy as well, right?
Mhm.
Because, and I've
Sure.
seen this happen on maybe on too many occasions where I've been friends with a few people in my life, especially along the journey I've been on, right? And I think we all have. Um, but I've been told by several friends, "Hey, man, you more of a brother than me, than my own brother." And I'm like, hold on, but I've known you both, right? And it
Mhm.
caused friction, like, oh, what I'm
Sure.
saying? You must think about him, you know what I'm saying? hold him at a higher place than me, and I'm your blood brother. And I never even intended on doing that because I'm a firm believer. You treat people right, you know what I'm saying? Because people remember the way that you treat them. And I've never changed the way, I've ever thought about that. I've always been like, hey, you're a friend, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna
Mhm.
treat you, even though we're friends, I'm gonna treat you like family. Whatever you need from me, I will give you the
Yeah.
shirt off your back, right? Um, and it caused, and I seen it get caused the friction, the jealousy between not only the two brothers, but me in between it, because they're like, it's because of you. I'm like, no, what did I do? I'm just being here. When those people have
Mhm.
passed away, I've seen it go in reverse as well. Whereas when one of them pass away and I'm there, the other one tend to navigate towards me as well. And then you see the guilt, right? Hey, I'm sorry I mistreated you, and things
Yeah.
like that. But the relationship that I have with these individuals did not diminish um, the pain that I felt.
Right.
It wasn't like, oh, this pain is for a friend. You know what I'm saying? I looked at it like, no, this pain is for a really good person that I knew, that I considered to be more than just a friend. It was part of my. I let these people in. So to be a friend, you have to have establish some sort of trust and vulnerability to allow these people into your life. Of, hey, no matter what, I know that you're not going to hurt me, type thing, right? You know what I'm saying? And for me,
Mhm.
that's huge, right? I got to be comfortable with you in order to share my life with you. And if I'm not comfortable, then I can keep you at arm's distance, because I have to
Oh,
protect
yeah.
myself.
Well, and a lot of bad behavior comes out when people are grieving,
Hmm.
and some of it's justified, some of it's exaggerated, some of it's completely misplaced.
Hmm.
But I often feel like I have to be on my guard. You
Right.
know,
Yes. Yes.
because someone might lash out at me for some reason that I'm not even aware of. You know, um, I was able to avoid that when my friend David died. David and I went out in college. We did we danced in shows together, musicals, but he was gay. And so that was the extent of the limit of the friendship, right? But we were as close as could be for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And when he got sick, the last few months, I became his sounding board, not his partner. I was his sounding board. And every now and then I'd say, does Rick know this? He's like, no, no, I'll tell him. And I'm like, you have to tell him. And when he received the last diagnosis, he had several conditions. The last diagnosis, which was close to the end, he only told me.
Mhm.
And I said, we were on the phone. I said, did you tell, what did Rick say? He said, well, I haven't told him yet. I'm like, oh my God, you have to tell him.
Right.
Well, I will. And I'm like, no, you have to tell him. This was a daily conversation for 11 days.
Mhm.
In the middle of that, he told his niece, who's a nurse. And I'm like, what about Rick? No, I haven't told him yet. I can't tell him. I'm like, why? I said, if he was going to leave you, he would have left you a long time ago.
Exactly. Right.
What are you worried about? And so finally on the 11th day, he told him. And he said, yeah, I told him I told you about this a week and a half ago. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. You know,
I just imagine that friction right there. Like, oh no,
oh
you
my
wasn't supposed to
God.
tell me that you told me.
I thought my head was going to explode when he said this.
Oh
And he
man.
said, what did he say? He said, that was a good call to tell her first.
Oh really?
And I was like, oh, thank God. And the night David was dying, Rick messaged me several times and let me know right away that he had died. And when I went to one of his memorial services. He had two because one wasn't enough, I guess. And I looked around the room and I realized I had known him longer than anybody else. There were no family members at this one. I had known him longer than his partner, than the people he worked with, than his friends. And it felt very strange. It felt strange because I knew a David that they didn't know.
Right.
And so I wound up spending the afternoon telling stories, which was good, but they were all shocked. I was like, just another example of, we have friends in different parts of our lives.
Right. I love that, man. I really do love that, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that have those stories. Now, when he passed, when Rick's partner passed away, how was the relationship between you and Rick after that? Because I know it can be pretty estranged. Did you guys maintain that bond?
We have kept in touch, yes.
Kept in touch.
We have kept in touch.
Okay.
Some of them, some of it's sort of perfunctory stuff. Some of it is, conversations about, David's cookbook collection. He was a chef and a culinary teacher. His cookbook collection and the conditions he put on the donation to the school, which were typical of him, but made us laugh, kind of, So,
Right.
we will always have that bond.
Okay. And that's always now.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we take for granted, and I see that a lot too, right? And I think in a lot of ways when we think about our partners, and things like that, we can often put them in the same category as the friend, friends
Sure.
and things like that, because you have to have some sort of relationship with them in order to be able to effectively communicate with them. And I think aside from the physical intimacy, there is a deeper level of intimacy to allow someone into such a open spot in your life, right?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? You have to be willing to accept that individual. And so when other people see this relationship, does it cause them to have questions about who you are and where did you come from, right? Because if you say, for instance, and the reason
Yeah,
why
that was a question that came up a lot at David's memorial service.
Okay, so yeah, like who are you and where did you come from, right? And I've had that happen before, right? Where I was like, people was like, so who are you? I'm like, I'm the Tony. They're like, the Tony? Where'd you come from? Oh, I've known such and such for, 5 years. Really? Prime example, my best friend, Richard Lepp. He was in a motorcycle accident in last, that was 1999. But I had known Rich for quite some time before I went to prison. And he was there when I got out. And he's the one who taught me how to ride motorcycles, right? Because I was like, getting on a motorcycle. And I seen too many things. And sure enough, he got me into riding a motorcycle. And he ended up getting killed on his motorcycle. From that point on, I never jumped on another one. Now, at his funeral, now here's the funny part. So his mother, his father, his brother, and his sister never met me. His mother and his brother knew who I was through conversations that he had with them, like Tony's my brother and this, that, and another. So they had already knew and formed this sort of thought or opinion about me through the conversations with him. Now, his father and his sister, on the other hand, that's where the conflict happened, right? You know what I'm saying? Because they caught me by myself. And then, and when you look around, well, I was the only dark colored person in the room, right? And they're like, who is this guy? First, his mother comes up, and I'm thinking to myself that they're conversating with each other, right? You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah, I know this person. Rich has talked about him. That's Tony and this, that, another. Him, heard and her son. Something that's the topic of the conversation. His mom comes over. She goes, "You must be Tony." I go, "Yes, ma'am, I am." She goes,
Mm.
"Richard talks so highly of you." Now, we had a conversation, lasted a few minutes. She walks off. She goes, "I'm gonna go say hi to everyone." I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll be here." She goes, "Okay, like if you need me, I'm over here." Shortly after that, his sister comes up to me and she goes, "So who are you?" Now, mind you, I didn't know that she didn't know who I was. So
Oh,
of course, me being having a personality that I have, I was like, "I'm the Tony," right? And she was like, "Well, the Tony, who are you?" I was like, "Oh," and you could tell that she was grieving, so the hurt was there, but she's still confused. And like, "Okay, the Tony, who are you?" And I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, I was joking around. My name's Tony. You know what I'm saying? I've known Rich for years. Um, Best friend. You know what I'm saying? He's been my brother, and we this is the things that we've been doing." And she goes, "I wonder why I've never heard about you." And here I am, we at this funeral, and here you are at this funeral, and I don't even know who you are. And she goes, why do we even try? Right? And she walks off. His dad walks over shortly after that, and then he goes, "So you knew Rich?" I say, "Yes, sir, I did. I knew Rich. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard a lot about you." He goes, "That's funny. I haven't heard nothing about you." Yeah. So, and that's funny because his wife knew, but he didn't know. I said,
well,
"Well," I was like, "Well, he goes, well, how did you know my son?" You know what I'm saying? And things like that. And when he and I got the chance to talk, he turned around. He goes, "Well, I'm gonna apologize to you for being so abrasive with the conversation. I just didn't know who you were. You know what I'm saying? And I've never heard about you." I said, "But your wife has heard about me." He goes, "Richard he was a good kid." I said, "Yes, sir, he was." You know what I'm saying? Rode motorcycles together. We worked together, and we was about to get into our own place. You know what I'm saying? And it was going to be three of us roommates and things like that. He goes, "Fine, you guys were really close." So in a way, although that confusion was there, he opened the door for us to have a more meaningful, in-depth conversation
right.
without the confusion, right? You know what I'm saying? Because I understand, hey, he just lost your kid, and I want to, I'm not going to, personal issue with you or anything like that. And on top of there, you know what I'm saying? The friendship, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm grieving my friend. And I guess this is where I started feeling out of place because I felt like I had no right? You know what I'm saying? And,
Hmm.
and, and as crazy as it may seem, I'm in a space with his family. And there's a handful of us that knew him that was friends that considered him more than friend. But here we are, they're grieving the loss of their, son, their brother, cousin, whatever, right? And we're just friends.
I think you really hit on something because, like the example I gave you with COVID, friends have no rights.
That's
You
what
do
it
not
felt
have a legal right. You cannot insist on visiting someone in the hospital or hospice. You don't even have the right to be at the funeral or the wake.
like.
You can be, they can limit it to family. And during COVID, it was limited to family.
Right.
And where do you go with your grief? Where do you go with it? You know, I think that COVID taught us a lot about grief and friendship because of those restrictions, the inability to grieve as we normally would.
Mhm.
When my friend Christy died almost 2 years ago, I realized recently that no one from the family spoke at the funeral.
Mhm.
The priest was a friend of hers from college, and I was a friend of hers from high school. And we were the only two who spoke about her.
Mhm.
And I was honored. But because of that, I felt such a huge burden,
Mhm.
you know, to remember her, to memorialize her, in a very honest and loving way. Um, I think that's unusual. I mean, that's the kind of thing I was used to back in the 80s and early 90s in the AIDS community, where family would not be there because family had abandoned these people. And it was only the friends who were there to do this. But I think, our whole concept of friendship changed during COVID. At least it
Yes.
did for me.
Yeah.
I probably kept Hallmark in business. I sent out so many cards. I would buy stamps 100 at a time.
Oh,
And at
wow.
first it was sympathy cards, but then it went to, regular birthday cards and just hang in there and hope you're doing okay. I sent a lot of cards, and
Right.
I made much more of an effort to keep in touch with my friends, especially the ones who lived alone.
Mhm.
And it was great when we could FaceTime. Um, I went on a Zoom meeting, and it was kind of early in COVID, probably like April, maybe May. And a bunch of my friends were on there, and I saw one of them, on the checkerboard, and
Yeah.
I just burst into tears. And I knew he was okay. I knew he was okay because we emailed all the time. But just to see him just, brought on tears. And most everyone I know let go of some friendships and added more friendships during COVID.
Okay. Now, I guess my next question would be, because you brought up something very interesting, about friends not having rights, to visit people that we care about and things like that because we're just considered friends, and they try to limit it to, immediate family.
Right.
I guess my question would be, do you feel that friends should have the same rights, that family members, because I know if I would have to answer this, my answer would be hell yes. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't understand the
Mhm.
relationship
Sure.
you have with this individual, and when you're talking to doctors or funeral directors and things like that, there's things that I would like to know, right? You know what I'm saying? What
Mhm.
can I contribute? Maybe I want to be a silent contributor, without the family knowing that someone else is helping them from the other side, so they don't have to worry about this, that, and other because of the relationship I have with this individual. So I pose that question to you. Do you feel that friends should have that same right as family when it comes down to close to people that are close to us?
In a perfect world, I would say yes. Um,
Mhm.
I think it's hard to get around the legalities, especially with
Yeah.
hospital visits, and unless we're the ones paying for the funeral, we don't have any rights with the funeral director. Um, but I think that, and this is probably an undue burden, but if the person who is dying gives instructions of who should be allowed in,
Mhm.
I have seen this go on for years in the AIDS community because, again, the family members weren't there. So they had to designate friends who were allowed to be
Mhm.
involved. Um, Sometimes they weren't allowed because they weren't family. Um, and that was horrible. Um, but that's just sort of a general, people should have the right to designate who supports them if they can.
Yeah.
Um, I think that most people just don't think of the effect of that separation on their friends. I think it just doesn't occur to them. Um, I don't think there's any, I don't think it's malicious. I think it can be. I think it,
Yeah.
I think it can be malicious, coming from family members. I think it can be malicious coming from someone who's dying.
I want to add to that, right? Because it brings me to something that I've often um, had a conversation with myself about it and with a few other people, right? Because I'm still trying to understand it. And it's the terminology or a quote, the selfishness of grief. I was actually going to do a panel discussion about this
Mm,
as well, right?
cool.
The selfishness of grief. And so when you start adding in these extra elements when it comes down to grief, grief is such a fickle thing. We all know this, right? We've been in the grief field. We walk with people in their darkest moments after they lose someone. So we've seen people who've experienced this, different levels of grief, different stages of grief, and we know how to navigate with them. You know what I'm saying? How to navigate with them. Now, when we think about that concept, the selfishness of grief, when it comes down to family and friends who are grieving the same loss, I often think to myself, and it's easy to take this personal, right? You know what I'm saying? But I've had to get outside of myself and not take things personal because I have a better understanding of it now. But it's easy to take it personal when people
Mhm.
often say that term, why are
Yeah,
you here? You're not family, right? This is a family thing,
right,
and things like that. But it's a different,
right.
it's the factor that things that we factored in. We just talked about this. You know what I'm saying? I don't think people really understand the relationship because we didn't have that relationship with this individual. They kind of negate the relationship that you have with that individual.
Yes.
And they
Yeah,
tend to be,
what I keep trying to remind myself when I get in those situations is,
mm,
these circles of excess,
mm,
you know, and what am I in a close enough circle to make demands,
mm,
to have reasonable expectations, you know, and my friend David, I said, I'm coming out to Colorado to visit to see you. And he's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. He's like, I don't want you here. And it just killed me when he
mm,
said that. But he explained why. And he said, you were there at this point in my life when I really needed you. I need someone different right now. And and I understood and I knew he was right. And I hated him for saying it, you know, because I wanted to just push everybody aside. And
right.
and I couldn't. And I even thought about, well, I'll just show up. He can't throw me out if I just show up. Um, but he would have, and he died before I could do that. Um, but I think it's normal to be selfish in grief. I don't think it's bad necessarily.
Well, that can go a couple of different ways, right? I
Mhm.
do agree. You know what I'm saying? When we think about the how selfish grief is, because it does demand your attention, it demands your acknowledgement, it demands what I'm saying,
Yeah,
you treat it with respect, right? You know what I'm saying? It demands you to be quiet. It demands you to sit still. It demands you to sit within it, right? You know what I'm saying? Um, Now that's to me, that's not a bad thing, and I understand that, for the most part. Now here's the tricky part, right? Um, because when that grief is selfish, I think we tend to look past um, others and how it affects them.
oh, definitely.
You know what I'm saying? Because the hurt that you feel is personal, right? It's your
Mhm.
hurt, and it goes back to that terminology: hurt people hurt people, right? And so when you have a relationship, so say for instance, if your brother or your sister passed away and you were friends with them, but yet they're grieving over here, it's easy for them to come and lash out at you
Yeah,
because they don't know, for one, they don't know the relationship that you had, and in their eyes, you're just a stranger at in their family's business, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, a lot of negative emotions come out as part of grief.
Right.
And I think, we all try to say, well, you shouldn't be angry. Well, that was the first book I wrote about being angry.
Hmm.
Like, you should be. Why wouldn't you be angry that your friend died?
Right.
Why wouldn't you be angry that someone you love died? I think it's normal. I think people try to brush it aside. I've been angry at funerals over the way they were run, you know, by ministers who never met the person who died
Right.
and couldn't be bothered to learn anything about them. I was at a funeral a year and a half ago, and the woman who died gave me my first theater job when I moved to Chicago. She had a very wonderful and important career in the theater community here. And they never talked about that part of her life. No one talked about that part of her life during the funeral. And there were a few of us sitting in the back, and, no one jumped up and, yelled or anything, but it was very deflating. Like a whole part of this person is not acknowledged. And I didn't even stay afterwards to talk to the family. I was pissed. I was like,
rightfully so, yeah.
That part of their life didn't exist, and our friendship didn't exist. But I've tried to get over that, but it still bothers me a lot.
Yeah, and like I said, rightfully so, right? You know what I'm saying? Because you had a relationship, and see, and that's why I said I think that's where it gets really tricky. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Trying to take into consideration everyone else that's involved, the relationship that you had, the relationship that they had with that individual, how they may perceive your presence in this moment, and how you may interpret your presence in this moment, right? Because when you're friends with someone, you want to look at their family and introduce yourself to them. You know what I'm saying? But in the same sense, they're looking at you because they're grieving, and it may not be as welcome. Sometimes it may be welcome. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes,
Sure.
yeah, and sometimes not. I would love to think that if I knew Vicky when she was younger, we had this beautiful relationship, and Lord forbid, you know what I'm saying, you get sick, and I'm there because I've always been there, just like you've always been there for me. And your family comes, although they may not know me. I would hope that they, because if I'm around, that means that they're not around as much as, as much as they should be, or, you know what I'm saying, they're just trying to get by. I would hope that they would come to me, or you, if it was me on the other end. I would hope that either our families would come to either one of us and ask them, how did you know them? And over a period of time, would love to sit down with me or you to share in those stories that the adventures that we've had, right? You know what I'm saying? The conversations, the laughter, you know what I'm saying? The first time that we cried on each other's shoulders and things like that. Hopefully they would look at that relationship and go, I would honor that. Does it happen? A lot of times, no. I would hope that it would, though, right? When we talk about grief and everything else.
It's complicated.
Oh, yeah.
It's complicated, and like I said, the world is very different than when we were growing up, So it's much more likely that a person's family and friends don't know each other. And that can, even under the best of conditions, someone's going to feel left out. Someone's going to feel disrespected, ignored, and even if there is no malice intended, it's, when I wrote this last book about grieving friends during COVID, I knew someone I knew would die. I didn't know so many friends would die.
Right.
And 12 died during 2022. And I only got to go to 2 funerals.
Wow.
And that's a lot of grief with no place to go.
Right.
And I was lucky that I knew most, I was prepared somewhat for the deaths that happened. None of them were from COVID. Um, but I didn't necessarily find out about the funerals in time that I could attend
Right.
because I wasn't in that close circle, a close ring of that circle. Um, and, that would not have happened when I was growing up because everybody knew everybody.
Right. Let's talk about the books that you wrote, right? Because that's it goes in depth as well, right? And I can't wait to dive into them and go into the world of Vicky, Victoria, and
Mm.
and just enjoy your work as well, right? You know what I'm saying? Because I've enjoyed our conversations, and like I said, between you and Marty, you guys have been a part of two of my conferences,
Yes.
right? You know what I'm saying, and we've had a blast every step of the way too, right? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? That was a blast just being able to do it. And so let's talk about your book and what inspired it, and then let people know where you
Mm.
can find it.
Um, like I said, I have no training in grief,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I was having tea with a friend of mine, 2006, the coffee house around the corner from our
Mm-hmm.
daughter's grade school. And Dell was one of the most amazing women I've ever known. We looked very strange together because I'm short and very white, and she was tall, elegant African American woman who was talented beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
Writer, screenwriter, poet, photographer, screenwriter. I mean, she could do anything. And so we looked a little odd together, but she was in remission from ovarian cancer. It was the second or third time she was in remission. And we were having tea, and I said, I have an idea for a book. So stories about people grieving the death of a friend. Now, she must have known that she was the inspiration for this. But all she said was, do it. And I'm like, I've never written a book before. She, that's okay, just do it. And that's how she was. She was always encouraging.
That's beautiful.
And 6 months later, she was dead. Um, and it took me a long time to write anything. I never written a book before. I knew nothing about writing. I knew nothing about publishing. So the first books came out in 2013. So it was a long time. But I started interviewing people in probably 2010, 2011.
Okay.
And the second person I interviewed was a guy who's a sports reporter here in Chicago who heard that I was doing this and wanted to tell the story of him and his best friend, who was also a sports reporter.
Right.
And I thought this was the first thing that I got wrong. We met at a sports bar where they always hung out, where there was literally a shrine on the wall of the bar to his best friend.
Oh.
And I had a list of questions. I had 30 questions to ask him. And I thought, well, this will take 15 minutes because men don't talk, right? An hour and a half later, we were on question number 3.
Well, that's the myth going out the window. Men do talk.
And I was like, oh, this is weird. And he would email me occasionally, still does now and then, with something he remembered or something he did to honor his friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, okay. And this kept happening where people would, especially men, would say they wanted to talk about their best friend who died.
Right.
But they hadn't been able to talk to anybody about them. And I realized that it was not a disadvantage that I wasn't a therapist. It was a big advantage because I
Right.
wasn't there to diagnose them or recommend treatment. I was just there to listen, which is
Right.
what every person who grieves needs.
Yeah.
And so I wrote these 6 little books about people grieving their friends. And then I wrote the book about straight women in the AIDS community. And when COVID started, people were asking me if I was going to write another book about people grieving friends during COVID. I was like, nope, not doing that. And because I knew it would be different and it would be harder.
Right.
And then I gave in, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I think it was because I was writing about people's grief in real time.
Mm-hmm.
COVID was still going on. You know, they were still suffering the effects of the pandemic and the inability to grieve their friends.
Right.
And so the grief was very fresh. And a lot of people turned me down when I asked to interview them because they weren't ready.
Right.
And not something you can push. You know, I couldn't say, oh, I think you're ready. You know, it's like I had to honor and respect that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very tough book to write. And I'll be honest, it's a tough book to read. I've had people tell me that they have to keep putting it down and just kind of sit with what they just read.
Yeah.
But I think the best review I've gotten so far is from a man on Amazon, someone I don't know. And it was a very short review because you don't have to leave a book report, length review.
Right.
And he said, I didn't realize I needed to read this book until I read this book. And I was like, wow, that's the best endorsement I've ever gotten for any of my books.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
just the
And
depth of those words.
yeah,
That should make you feel really, really good, right? You put some out into the world that had
I was
such
in shock. I'm still kind of in
right.
shock.
Well, yeah, and you should be, right, because those words right there, those words are like golden. You know what I'm saying? When someone can go, especially if it's a male, and you say it's hard to get men to talk,
Yeah.
and for him to read that book and say, I didn't know I needed to read this book until I read this book. Do you know what that means? That means that you brought
It's
something to
huge.
this man. Yeah, that's huge. You brought something to light in this man's heart, mind, and spirit that made him realize where he was at.
And I've
to
had several people also say it made them feel less alone in
yeah,
what they went through.
yeah. Just like this conversation, talking with you and everything, because we relate to many, many different things when it comes down to friendship, grief. I've shared my experiences, some of them. And when we think about the people who are out there, saying leaving and how we feel so alone in this journey, because it's not like we're family.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're family. So you don't owe me any sort of, explanation or invitation into the world that you're living in or just been introduced into when it comes down to your grief journey. You don't owe me any of that. And that's a very, very, it's a hurtful place, one, but it's a very lonely place too, because
It
at the
is.
end of the day, when you go home, you're the one that's dealing with that relationship loss.
That's right.
And
That's right.
the sad part about it is no one sees it.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
that's a very lonely, empty, hurtful place. And we have a tendency of crying in silence because we don't think anyone else would understand.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I think that's what stops a lot of people from reaching out. is that
Yes.
they're absolutely sure that no one will understand.
And it happens so many times. You know what? We need a Facebook group or something to where we can make this thing happen. You know what I'm saying? Because man, I sit up here saying that I felt sad. I'm over here like, man, this would be something that we can do to bring more awareness to this. Because man, um, I realized having this conversation with you how much that is needed across the board.
Well, I think that, like I was in several groups on Facebook um, during COVID,
Hmm.
and some of them were people who lost friends and family members to COVID. Others were groups of long term survivors in the AIDS community who were going through their second pandemic and were being triggered in all kinds of ways.
Right.
And those were writing, the latter were writing groups. And so, we just tried to get people to write down what they were going through as a way of working through it.
Hmm.
And I think that you don't have to be a professional author, you know,
Right.
it's journaling or diary or whatever you want to call it, you
Hmm.
know, is a great tool for working through this kind of thing. Um, but yeah, there's no substitute for finding people who understand.
Hmm. I definitely like that. Definitely like that. Victoria,
Mm.
thank you for this very in-depth conversation. I really, wow. I'm just over here just thinking to myself, like, what can we do, right? You know what I'm saying? Because that's the way my mind works. You know what I'm saying? When it comes down to it, how can I be a better servant in these different areas? You
Mhm.
know, of giving,
Mhm.
and servitude to our communities,
Mhm.
and that just adds another element. And I'm always thinking. I'm always thinking. But I digress. Thank you for such an amazing conversation. And it's always great to catch up with you, right?
It
We got
is.
to not wait so long to be talking to each other. You know what I'm saying? We
I
got to
know.
keep me in the loop of what's going on with you. You know,
Thank you for having me.
of
I was
course.
really looking forward to this.
I would, you know what? It's
I
been a
hope I
lot.
lived up to your introduction.
Oh yes, you did. Oh, look, you already know you did. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got
Thank
a
you.
lot more things coming as well. You know, it's not
Yeah.
like we don't know each other. And I love the fact that I've met you. You're such an inspiration, such a bright
Oh,
light in
thank
people's
you.
minds. And
Thank you.
so,
As
it's
are
for me,
you.
it's an honor. It's definitely an honor to finally have you on to do a one-on-one with you in a topic of that, you know what I'm saying, that you're very,
Sure.
very familiar with, right? Um, Now, secondly, how can people find you?
Well, the easiest way to find me is on my website, which is you can see my name on the bottom of my screen, victorianoe.com. Um, I'm also on Facebook, Victoria Noe Author. Um,
Mhm.
I'm on Instagram, Victoria Noe 1131. Um, I'm on LinkedIn. Um, I'm on all those, and you can get my books wherever you get your books. Um, Off my website, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, Kobo, whatever.
Yeah. And see, I have your book, so I feel real
So
special.
you've got them already.
Yes, I already got them. I'm going to be reading these books, man. You guys do some amazing work. Um, and with that being said, Victoria, thank you again for being on.
Thank you for
For
having me.
everyone,
I appreciate it.
of course, we got many more. You know what I'm saying. So if you ever come up with another topic that you want to talk about, please let me know. And
I
but
will.
also stay tuned. We got a lot of other things coming up. Far as with the conference and everything. So hopefully you'll be able to
Yeah.
join us again this year. You and Marty. We was going to do it in Vegas, but I think with the vendors and everything, we got kind of twisted around. So I think we're going to do another virtual one, which is I think it'll be a lot easier for everyone
Mhm.
and not feel so rushed. So that's coming about.
That's good.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's going to be a good thing. And
Great.
for everyone who have been
I look
tuning in,
forward to it.
yes, yes, yes. I look forward to having you on again. For everyone who's been tuning in, if you made it this far and enjoyed the conversation, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. You know how we do it, man. And if you guys and know someone who could benefit from these conversations that we have, please share it with them, you know. And as always, I am Tony Lynch. This is going to conclude this episode of Let's Talk About It Wednesday. And today we talked about friendship grief, my friend Victoria Noel. And I just want to say thank you guys for your support. And until next time, you guys keep your head up. We love you. And we're out. Peace.